and welcome to HDSA's Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today we're going to learn more about using social media for advocacy and to speak up for HD. And we are going to hear from Shana Glickfield, who I'm so excited to learn from. But before I ask Shana to begin, I'm just going to go over how to ask a question as well as how to access this presentation after broadcast. Just a brief disclaimer that all of this information is for informational purposes only. So as far as questions, and please ask questions anytime you want to do something. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Shane is going to leave time at the end of her presentation to answer any questions. To send a question, just go to your control panel and type in your question and hit send. And as a reminder, we're going to leave time at the end for questions. This webinar will be available for viewing approximately 1 week after broadcast on the HDSA national website, www.hdsa.org. And you'll be able to view it by going to the Living with HD section, and you'll see a link for Lunch and Learn. And now I'm so thrilled to introduce Shana Glickfield. Shana is a founding partner at the Beekeeper Group, where she helps a wide variety of clients with their communications and advocacy strategies. Shana specifically focuses on social media and online community building. She has an innovative approach to communications that's been widely acclaimed. She was named to Washington Post's list of up-and-comers in technology, and she was also recognized as one of the most creative people in new media by Washington Life magazine. Shana is also the founder of the renowned local blog, the DC Concierge. Shana is a frequent presenter and commenter on social media topics and has appeared on CNN, Mashable, ABC News, Time, Politico, and Capitol Hill. I'm so thrilled to turn it over to Shana.
Okay. All right, I am getting these slides teed up. Okay, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about Beekeeper Group after Jane gave us the great introduction. Beekeeper Group is a new model for public affairs and community building. So you might have heard the term grassroots before, and we like to think of it in terms of busy bees, and that your bees are already buzzing. So you, being HDSA's community of activists, are already buzzing, and we want to collect some of that honey and bring that over to the policymakers at Capitol Hill. And I'll try and not go overboard with our bee puns, but they do come out once in a while. So we work with all kinds of clients, a lot of health associations, just like HDSA, as well as many other industries. And again, usually the goal is using online communications to reach policymakers. And this is me. You can sort of see the Capitol over my right-hand shoulder there. But I have a lot of experience helping all kinds of nonprofits, trade associations, and corporations using all kinds of these online tools that we'll talk about today to get your message heard by the right folks. So I want to talk about why we're here, and I'm really excited to be here because social media, as I was saying and as Jane said, is a big passion of mine. And social media is still new, so there's an opportunity for you all to help rise above the email inbox clutter and chaos and really get heard and get your community involved at the same time. So these new ways of communicating give you unprecedented access to get in front of stakeholders, legislators, media, and other decision makers that you want to connect with. And of course, it's a lot less expensive than trying to facilitate a face-to-face meeting, especially if we're talking about flying all the way to Washington to meet for a few minutes with a policymaker. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the great work of HDSA, and so I want to just teach you a few ways of getting that out there and using what I call deeper connections or a multiplier effect, so that your communications and your work with HDSA gets more visibility than it would in the past. So I want to take a step back and think about what social media actually is. You might have heard other names for it. Sometimes it's called Web 2.0, new media, social networks. It has all kinds of names. But really, the basis for all these sites is user-generated content. So if we didn't have people participating in the sites, they would just be skeletons of websites. So if you think about Facebook, if no one built a profile, or Twitter if nobody tweeted, or Flickr if nobody had photos, and even Wikipedia if nobody contributed to Wikipedia, these would all be empty websites. So they're all based on user-generated content. And the new concept here is the concept of self-publishing. So there's no more intermediary between author and getting your message out. You now have the opportunity of one-to-many communications, and this is the real game changer. So now there's a fundamental shift in the power because you have similar resources and tools of one-to-many communications that it used to be only traditional media outlets had. And so this one-to-many power is where we want you to get active. And so if you look at the two different pictures, you'll see a lot of different sort of mainstream media publications. But really, it's the picture on top with all kinds of people communicating each other that's really disrupting the media landscape, as in the people are now the media, and you have the same tools. You no longer need to have a PR professional to get your voice heard. You have the same opportunities to connect. And I also like to use the term virtual handshake a lot. And so basically, you can connect with famous people or journalists or whoever you want to reach, policymakers, through these tools in a way you didn't have access to before. This is all sort of one big pep talk to tell you that you actually are a very powerful activist now because of today's tools, even ones that you can just find on your mobile phone. And you also have an audience, so eyeballs are moving. People are spending less and less time with traditional forms of media, like the nightly news and a newspaper. And now eyeballs are moving to iPads and computers and mobile devices and things like that. And so if you think about it, when you email a policymaker, you're really communicating in a closed loop. But when you tweet at a policymaker or connect on Facebook with a policymaker, you're really sharing this information publicly. And that's really different because you can help spread the message, and then it also makes your policymakers more accountable to respond because other people can see it. So think about having an audience now. And I want to encourage you to spend time in these communities because this is where a lot of people are spending their time. And I actually had a lot of different charts and graphs I thought about sharing, and I just narrowed it down to one. But basically, 20% of all time spent online is being spent on social networking sites, Facebook being the most popular both globally and in the U.S. And 30% of all online time via mobile devices spent on social media as well. And when you think about the demographics of who's using social networks, I really want to dispel the myth that, bloggers are just teenagers in their basement and, their underwear and who can't get out of their parents' house. It's not the case. And, people on Facebook aren't just teens and 20s or Gen Y. The fastest growing demographics on these sites are actually middle-aged to older adults. And people who spend time on social networks, especially influencers, tend to be highly educated. They tend to share news and information, and they tend to have higher educations and income brackets. So you are connecting with influencers when you spend time on social media sites. And I also want you to think about these numbers in terms of the two-screen world. And many of you have probably spent time watching television or reading a paper and also using that time to connect either via your iPad or mobile device. So think about that in terms of people spending more time on two screens at the same time. Well, I want to go through a couple of the benefits of engaging online. And these go for HDSA as an organization, as well as you as an individual who is communicating on behalf of HDSA. So one of the opportunities here is brand visibility. So even though you might be highly engaged with HDSA, your community might not be as aware about it, about the organization, the activities that the organization is doing. So we want to count on you as brand ambassadors of the organization to carry HDSA messages out into the public and help us develop a brand and just be visible on the social channels. This is also really important in case of a crisis or a media opportunity. So maybe if Huntington's disease were to get in the news for some reason through a celebrity or an incident or something, you want to take that opportunity to really communicate HDSA messages while people are paying attention. So this could be considered a crisis or it could be considered an opportunity, but you also don't want to be building your community at that time. You want to have your communication tools in place before you need them. Remember, this is an opportunity for you to go directly to your community, so you want to have that built up before that opportunity comes along. So you don't want to be adding Twitter followers during a crisis. Media relations is also an important component. Journalists are reading social media for story ideas. This is where buzz is being generated. And also journalists are very accessible on these communities, and you can start to build a relationship and pitch them via social media on the things that you're doing to raise the visibility of Huntington's disease. Maybe it's a fundraiser, maybe it's a meetup, maybe it's a piece of policy or legislation. Whatever it is, you can connect with traditional journalists or bloggers through these tools. Thought leadership. This is a great opportunity for you to share your expertise and experiences. What seems boring to you is actually really fascinating to others. So what seems sort of day-to-day life for you because you are highly engaged with the HDSA community will be brand new information to others. So don't be shy about sharing things. Or the way I like to think about it is working out loud. So if you take action on some HDA advocacy or legislation, you want to tell your community about it and why you support it. Or maybe you just have a story to tell about your life or dealing with Huntington's disease. So this is your place to build up your expertise, and again, that also gets the attention of journalists and policymakers. These tools are very low cost. Well, they're pretty much free, but you do have to remember the time is the investment. You will only get out what you put in. So the more time you spend in social media channels and being a brand ambassador for HDSA, the more you'll get out of it. And you want to spend time building your community. So not only is this an opportunity for you to share information and calls to action, but also to listen and take information in and hear what other people are doing and saying. And finally, and my favorite, is the opportunity to really humanize. So social media gives you an opportunity just to be human and connect people better with Huntington's disease in a more meaningful way than through other brands or organizations, more just human to human. Which brings me to my next point of why this is such a powerful advocacy tool, is people really trust getting information from their peers. So there's different levels, of course. If you read something in Washington Post or hear it from NIH, you might be likely to take action. But maybe if HDSA says something or tells you to take action, your community will be likely to do it. But the most likely they'll be is if you say it, as an individual who's passionate and caring, and hearing it from someone that they have a person-to-person relationship with. That's where people really start to take action. That's how things sort of go viral. So share your stories, share your experiences, and share your opinions. And ask people. Don't forget to make the ask and be clear about what you want them to do. And you'd be amazed how many people will do it. I also want to assure you that Congress is using social media. Congressional offices are increasingly building social media into their day-to-day constituent communications, outbound communications, and listening, of course. And if you think about the demographics of Hill staff, this makes a lot of sense. For better or for worse, if you walked around on Capitol Hill, you would find that a lot of the staff for policymakers are in their 20s and 30s. And what this means is a lot of them are digital natives. And so communicating through things like instant message or Facebook isn't new to them. This is something they've been doing for years and years, and in fact, it feels more natural. So if you think about policymakers and their staff, this is where they're spending time, this is where they're gathering their news, and we even have some data to back that up, like the fact that nearly 2/3 of staff surveyed think Facebook is an important way to understand constituents' views. So your first step is going to be sure to go like the Facebook page of your representatives and senators just to start building those channels of communication. And if anyone's interested in more data on how members of Congress are using social media, I recommend you go to the website of the Congressional Management Foundation, and I can follow up with HDSA to share some of these resources. But that's only if you really want a deeper dive. But for now, just take my word for it. And this is a great infographic that Twitter just released, I think, last week. And you can see, oh yes, it says on the bottom, updated January 18th, 2013. They released it with the inauguration last week. And this is to show you how well adopted Twitter usage is by the U.S. Congress. And so for the 113th Congress, we have 100 members of the Senate. 100% of the Senate members now have active Twitter accounts, and 90% of the House. So 398 members of the House are active on Twitter. And this is really great news because this gives you a clearer opportunity to be heard via Twitter. And these are drastic increase from just the last Congress. In the 112th Congress, Twitter says that only 44% of the Senate and only 35% of the House were active on Twitter. So this is a drastic increase. And I think a lot of it probably came from these members seeing how successful campaigning through social media has been and then wanting to keep in touch with these constituents and their base through these channels. And don't forget your state and local. So whether you have state or local battles or just want to connect with policymakers so that you can build a national campaign through local channels, state legislatures are actively participating in social media. This is a great way to connect with your governors. This is a great way to connect with your mayors and things like that. So I encourage you to also take a look through some social media channels and see who's available to connect with. And of course, this goes all the way to the top. President Obama is actually very active on social media. He has a Facebook profile. He has a Twitter account. He has been great doing Twitter town halls and Facebook town halls and Google Plus town halls or Google Plus Hangouts. But all these are like live streams where he actually connects with people and does question and answers in real time. And he designates what's called a hashtag, which we'll talk more about, so that people everywhere can participate in the conversation. And of course, as I was saying before, the media is spending a lot of time on social media channels. So this is a great way to translate your social media activity into mainstream media activity. So reporters, they're swamped with email, and they really like the ability to have fast and short communications with people over social media channels. So when you participate, you're offering them a quote, you're offering them a resource. Just by being visible, they can get to know you better. And then when your cause or issue does come up, they'll know who to get in touch with when they're doing a story on something relevant to them. And you can get on their radar by tweeting at them or following them in ways that I feel like you couldn't do just by being another one of the thousands of emails they get a day. A great case study on this, just as an example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with a couple of years ago when the plane crashed into the Hudson River, and there was a miracle on the Hudson, and there was this photo that went everywhere of someone who was just a passerby happened to see the plane crash while it happened. He took a picture with a mobile phone, and it wasn't even a smartphone. It was just sort of one of those old flip phones. Took a picture and tweeted the photo of that image of people standing on the wings of the plane on the Hudson River. And that photo became the photo that was shared by everyone from, local news channels to CNN. And, of course, that person built up a big Twitter following afterwards, but they didn't have a big Twitter following before. But by sharing that image and letting media know about it, other media then shared it with other media, his community shared it with their community members, and the photo really went viral. So you all have the opportunity to not only repeat the news, but to make the news. Let's see. So how can you use it? I'm going to dig a little deeper into some of the bigger social media sites. Of course, there are thousands of them. But we're just going to focus on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram for now. And through this, I want to introduce you to a term. I didn't create a slide for it, but the word I like to use, and it was founded and trademarked by a guy named Jason Seiden, and the word is professional, and it's a combination of the word professional and personal. And Jason Seiden coined this term of being professional as a way to build community on these channels in a way that is a good balance of your personal and professional life. So while we're encouraging you to amplify the messages of HDSA on your social media channels, we recognize that pushing out only HDSA channel messages on your personal accounts won't make you a very fun person to connect with on social media. So feel free to still be yourself, share your baby photos, share, what you're working on at work and other things that you're doing, but you can be professional as well and push out HDSA messages part of the time as well. Just using a balance and using good judgment is what we find to be most effective. So starting with Facebook, I'm sure hopefully many of you already have a profile on Facebook, but most policymakers and businesses use what's called, and big nonprofits use what's called a page. So the general public has a profile, and businesses and organizations and policymakers have a page. And you want to go ahead and go like the pages of your elected officials and other groups in your coalition and people that you want to connect with on these social media channels. Liking, which you've probably seen as the little hand symbol with the thumbs up, is the currency of Facebook. So people, once you like a page, their updates will start to come into your feed. And then when you're using it, make sure you tag people in your photos and videos and updates, because that increases the ability to reach a broader audience. And by tagging on Facebook, you just use the @ symbol in front of an organization or person's name, and that helps you get more mileage out of your update. And we'll see an image of that in a second. Make sure you download the Facebook application to your mobile device, and that'll make it easier for you when you take a picture with your mobile phone to update right from your mobile device. And again, this is an easy way when you're standing in line somewhere and you have some time to kill, or if you are at an event, an HDSA event, and you want to amplify it and you don't have your full computer set up there, there's a lot you can do on Facebook just from your mobile device. I do want to caution you, though, to remember that this is a public forum and it can be seen by others. And as we all know, Facebook has some complicated privacy settings that even Mark Zuckerberg's sister, Randy Zuckerberg, recently had an incident where she posted what she thought was a private family photo on Facebook, and some general public people got a hold of it and people started sharing it on Twitter. And so even the Zuckerberg family has recently had incidents where what you think you're sharing is private really can be seen by others. So I always use what I call the Washington Post test. Whatever I post on social media, I think, would I be okay if this showed up on the front page of the Washington Post tomorrow? So use that sort of as your standard, because, and that's also just a best practice for, all kinds of social media communications, because they can be seen by others, even outside of Facebook. So these are two quick screen grabs of HDSA properties on Facebook. Again, these are pages rather than profiles, but the anatomy is very similar. What you have now is called a Facebook timeline, and in the background there you get a very big picture for a background picture, which you can easily change. You'll see on HDSA's main page, they want to promote the 28th Annual Convention. And on HDSA's advocacy page, we're promoting community. So you can see right below, there's a little button that says like, and I encourage you right after this webinar to go find these pages by searching for them. And that means just in the Facebook search bar, you can put in Huntington's Disease Society of America and HDSA advocacy, and these will come up in your search, and click like, and that will give you some ways that you can easily share what HDSA is already doing into your community feed. And this is going back to tagging and sharing photos. So here's a screen grab where you can see next to a photo there's a box where you can put in comments, you can add a date, you can tag people, you can edit people. So I really encourage you not just to upload a photo, but to really spend some time giving it the proper tags and the proper reach so that people can then share it in their communities. I also want to encourage you to start tagging your policymakers. Like we said, once you follow them, their names will come up, and you know, maybe it's a status update, maybe you're sharing a video and you want to get their attention, maybe you want to just mention them in a call to action like we see in the example here. But again, you see in the top screen, my colleague is saying, I'd like @Senator, and when you use that @ symbol, one of the people that you follow will come up as a number of choices, and you can just click on it. And then they will get it in their feed that they were mentioned. However, I do want to caution you not to abuse this. Use it only in select situations. And now I'm going to move into Twitter. Hopefully a lot of you already have a little bit of a Twitter account. You've probably heard some of these terms before. You can send out a tweet via Twitter. You can also text it from your mobile device or text it from a Twitter app on your mobile device. A tweet is limited to 140 characters, but you'd be amazed what you can squeeze in there, especially using links to other resources. Followers are people who follow your tweets, and if you're following, that means that you're getting their tweets into your feed. There's something called a retweet, which is when someone else retweets your tweet and shares it with their feed. Again, this is how information tends to go viral. And we encourage all of you to retweet some of HDSA's tweets so that people outside of our followers can hear from you as well. And finally, a hashtag, which is a really important thing to use in all kinds of communications. These are designated keywords that are attached to a tweet with a pound symbol. And so if you search that keyword within Twitter or many other social networks, you'll see things are tagged. So if you tag things with pound HDSA, that means people will be able to see it if they're searching that hashtag in a larger feed. And again, back to the @ symbol, this is something you see before a Twitter name, and that means that the person who's mentioned will get an alert that they were mentioned. So you want to put the @ symbol when you're communicating about people or organizations that are, or policymakers that are active on Twitter. And I'll give you another example real quick right here. So if you use Twitter to send a tweet, you want to say, I'm urging my representative @ Chris Van Hollen, and you want to make sure you're using the appropriate policymaker's Twitter handle, to vote no on, and here we're seeing a hashtag because we're using the pound symbol before the name and number of the specific legislation, to stand up for clean water and our rights. And here we use the hashtag mining, again, to reach people who might be searching a broader topic of mining rather than the bill number. And then we send a link back. We put a link in for more information to the organization. So that's sort of using all the tricks and tools in one tweet. You can spread that around a little bit. Sometimes you might want to just, you know, ping your policymaker and let them know you care about an issue. Sometimes you'll use more hashtags, especially if you have a specific bill number. And sometimes you might just want to link back to your website or to a news article or to something else that catches your attention. So going back, here is a screen grab of HDSA's Twitter feed. and you'll see some of the terms that we were talking about. You can see HDSA has 140 characters to describe themselves, and they also have a link back to the HDSA organization's website for more information. They have 943 followers, and of course, HDSA touches many, well, the disease touches many, many more lives than that. So we could consider that sort of a small following that we want to tap you, our network, to help us build and grow. We're not following any folks, but that's pretty common for organizations and businesses. So we're almost at 1,000 followers, and we have done up 440 tweets so far. If you were to click on that follow button with the little bird, then HDSA's tweets would now be, you would become one of their followers, and their tweets would show up in your feed. So a few more bits on using Twitter. Again, I really recommend that you add the app to your mobile phone and set it up with your account so that you can tweet via your mobile device when you have a spare minute. I encourage you to follow other organizations and influencers in your community to help build up a community. When you're updating Twitter, make sure you use the appropriate hashtags. You want to mention your legislators with that @ symbol so that it will be seen by their office. And these tools, you can use text, but you can also tweet photos or videos and links to more information. And again, I want to go back to the concept of being pro-personal, which means people always say, well, why would I be active on Twitter? I really don't care what other people had for breakfast this morning. So if you're really just tweeting about what you're having for breakfast and you're not being interesting on Twitter, you're not going to have a big following. But if you use a good combination of maybe if you are having a fantastic breakfast, don't be shy. Feel free to share that. People want to get to know you. But also combine that with professional information and news of interest and things that make you more valuable to the conversation at large. So here at the screen, sorry, it's a little bit small on the screenshot, but you can see people use the hashtag #HD, #Huntington's, #Huntington's disease. There's all different hashtags to get into the larger Huntington's disease conversation. And I'll show you examples of that on other social networks in a minute. Here's our strategic tweet we shared. And now I'm going to move on to YouTube. And really, I could spend an hour at least just talking about each of these channels, so please consider this just an overview. And I encourage you all to experiment with the different social media channels and then find the ones that you're most comfortable with and really focus on those, because it can be very time-consuming to spend time on all different social networks. YouTube is a good example of one that you don't need to be in all the time, like probably isn't a part of your daily life as much as Twitter or Facebook, but video is a great way for you to tell the Huntington's disease story in different ways, especially first person, telling your camera, why are you here, why is this important to you. You can, again, go back to one of the benefits of social media where you can really humanize this issue. Tell your own story to your community of why it's important that people, email their policymakers or tweet at their policymakers or support certain legislation. Video can be very powerful, and you really don't need sophisticated camera equipment to use YouTube. Just use your mobile phone, or many laptops and computers have video devices within with decent audio and things like that. So you really don't need a professional to do this. In fact, when it looks like you just did it on your own and you're just talking one-on-one with the camera, that can be some of the most powerful video that there is. But again, going back to some of the tools we use, you want to make sure once you put it out there that it gets seen, and that's where annotations and hashtags and descriptions come involved. YouTube is the second most commonly searched site after Google. So it is like being used like a search engine. So you want to go ahead and search things like Huntington's disease and maybe other keywords that are relevant and see what's coming up. And that might help you give some ideas for what you want to tag your information. And then once you upload it to YouTube, you can also share it out via Facebook and Twitter to get more views on it. So just taking a minute to go search Huntington's disease on YouTube. You can see I found HDSA advocacy. It has a more professional looking video that I found that has over 1,000 views. That's something you all could share on your social media channels. But I also found the story of this one girl who, again, just took a video camera, probably just her mobile device, and just in a human format where she doesn't have nearly the same community as an organization like HDSA. And you can see she's got almost 1,000 views on her video just talking about what Huntington's disease is, how it's impacted her family, and how she copes with it. So I also want to, if you're not comfortable with video, some people aren't comfortable communicating with video and audio, there's also a lot of photo sharing tools that you can use to communicate with images that can be equally powerful. I'm sure many of you have seen Flickr before, and that has a lot of the same social media capabilities as other sites, where you can like, you can share, you can use hashtags and things like that so that your photo gets seen by a larger community. You can also use Flickr as a photo storage site. So maybe you go to a local HDSA event, a chapter event, and you take all kinds of pictures. You can upload those to Flickr and then still share them on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. I'm skipping over Instagram because I'm going to come back to that, but I also want to mention Pinterest is a really popular social network that just sort of tipped to the mainstream community in the last year or two. And it's highly visual. People pin things to a board. And there's a link to photo taking and things like that. So if you've ever dabbled in Pinterest and that's your most comfortable social network, use that as an opportunity to also share the HDSA message there. And going back to Instagram, again, hasn't been around that long. It was just launched in October of 2010. But it's got 90 million monthly active users who are uploading 40 million photos per day. And those photos are getting an average of 8,500 likes per second. So this is actually a really vibrant, active photo sharing community. I believe Facebook has bought Instagram. Pretty sure that's the biggest transaction, one of the big social media deals, but it's still its own standalone app. But Facebook kind of thought, well, gosh, why don't we do this? This is just photo sharing and tagging, and this is something that should be a part of the Facebook family. So basically, when you set up a profile on Instagram, you set it up on your mobile device, and you take pictures, and you upload them to Instagram. And it's really that simple. You use the app, and you tag. And so on the left, you can see I searched the tag. You can see right under, this is a screen grab from my phone, right under the time, you can see pound Huntington disease. And just by searching the hashtag, all these different photos came up. And I don't have to follow these people or anything. I'm just searching a hashtag, and I can see what photos represent Huntington's disease. And the way they showed up in that feed, you can see on the photo on the right, this girl, for example, is wearing her Team Hope HDSA t-shirt. So she took a picture of herself. And you can see on the bottom, she tagged it with the hashtag pound Team Hope, pound Huntington's disease, pound awareness. And if anyone clicks on any of those tags, they'll see all the different photos that were tagged with those words. And so again, this is just, for people who learn and communicate more visually, I definitely recommend using Instagram as a way of growing visibility and awareness around the disease. So I ran through all this in, I think, about 40 minutes because I wanted to leave time for questions. I know I ran through a lot of information, and so in the spirit of social media, I think we should run this in the format of a conversation. So I'd be curious to hear if anyone has any feedback, any questions, and any experiences with social media that they'd like to share.
Thank you so much, Shana. And just as a reminder to everybody, in order to ask a question, just type it into your question pane and hit send. So Shana, to start off, actually, I have a question. If I wanted to connect to my members of Congress on Facebook or on Twitter, what do you recommend is the best way to do that?
Well, for Twitter, I use a website called Tweet Congress. It's tweetcongress.org. And I'm not sure if they've updated yet for the 113th Congress, but they were definitely updated for the 112th. And when you go to that website, it'll ask you for your zip code. And when you punch in your zip code, it will pull up the profiles and all the social media information for your senators and members of Congress.
Oh, wow.
Including where they are on YouTube and things like that. And if you go, you know, all of the social networks have search bars at the top. So if you already know who your senator or member of Congress is, you can just search their name at the top and make sure you get their official page. Also on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/Congress. And what's interesting too, when you, if you don't just want to follow the individual policymakers, a lot of federal agencies like HHS and CDC, they are all also active on social media, both for taking in information and pushing information out, and a lot of committees as well. So you really need to spend some time digging around, thinking about who do you want to reach, and making sure you find them on all their different social media channels.
That sounds great. And for everyone on the line, if you don't know who represents you in Congress, you can find out on our website or just by contacting me.
Okay. I'm missing the questions. Oh, here we go. There we go. Sorry, just a second. Here's a question. What's the single best idea to build Twitter followers in the Great Lakes region? We have been doing tweets for a year and only have 80 followers. Okay. I love that you're thinking about building community. That's really important. And, you know, numbers are a vanity metric, you know, so there's no right or wrong number. You could actually buy 1,000 followers on Twitter for, I think, like $20. But if they're not people who are going to care about your issue or your topic, then you sort of just wasted $20. So I'm a big advocate for growing your community very organically and finding people who care about your issue and your topic. But to get started on Twitter, I would think about some partner organizations that also do a lot of sort of health issues, or if you do know of anyone that does Huntington's disease specifically in your area, then go through and look at their followers. And basically, it's completely socially acceptable on social media to do what I call sort of poaching followers. But look at someone who you want to mimic, or a community that you see active around the issues or topics that you care about, and just go through and follow their followers. And again, this goes back to you get out what you put in. So it does take time to build community. I call these social channels free, like a puppy is free. You can get a puppy for free, but it takes a lot of care and feeding to get it to, you know, be a really great puppy. So I recommend spending some time, and it's specifically in the Great Lakes region. If you know your area, look at hashtags like Pound Great Lake or Pound. People also use Pound in the state name, so Pound MI for Michigan, Pound WI for Wisconsin, and you'll find a lot of policymakers also use that to make sure their messages are getting out, or if you want to tap into sort of the state. Hopefully I answered that a little bit. But my biggest advice, and also one other sort of shortcut tool you can use, is a website called wefollow.com, wefollow.com. And you can search and see who the influencers are in your community. How has social media changed press releases, and should we be writing them, sending them differently? The answer is very much so. Social media is an extremely disruptive technology for mainstream media. You know, once again, because everyone is now a publisher, so they're competing for eyeballs, but also because press releases are now different. You know, there's what's called a social media press release, which means that when you put out a press release, you can add different social media functionality, like a YouTube video and like a hashtag you're using. So I would encourage you to just Google social media press releases to see what the best practice is there. And while I don't say, you know, you don't need to do press releases anymore, I think they're still a good way for reaching media people who still prefer to communicate in that format. I do believe there are so many more journalists who are using social media for story ideas. So what I usually recommend is once you finish the press release, I turn that into a blog post, and you can turn that blog post into a couple of tweets. And I would also put your press release in video format by having a leader at your organization just sit in front of a camera and talk about what's making news today face-to-face. And that way, you know, you can communicate with journalists in whatever media they prefer to, not just journalists, but your whole community. So a lot of people prefer to, you know, get their information by watching a 30-second or 1-minute video rather than reading a press release now. So I would say continue to do the press release, but just turn it into all different kinds of social media formats, especially if you want to, sorry, I lost my train of thought because I looked at another question, but turn it on into all different kinds of formats so that you get more views. Bloggers and people who are active on social media are not familiar with the concept of embargo. I would just warn you there. So press release is just a different form of them getting information, but they prefer it in a way that's more easily shareable on social media. So hopefully I addressed that question. Another question. For a beginner, can you recommend a book on using Facebook? That's a great question. I'm turning to my bookshelf right now and sort of scanning it. I would even say you don't even need to buy a book. I would just use search engines as your tool, and especially in this context, maybe like a Facebook for Advocacy, or if you sort of just use Google and say Beginner's Guide to Facebook. Even if you search that on YouTube, I bet you could find some really great videos. Again, it's the best practice is sort of just leaving yourself a half hour to an hour to spend some time engaging in the site is sort of the best trick to get to know it after you read a little bit of an introduction. And I think it's counterintuitive because we've sort of been taught that social media is, you know, social. And, you know, if I own a business now with 10 employees, and I encourage them to spend time on social networks. Of course, this is what we do for our clients, but also I encourage you all, you know, so many HR policies say, you know, block Facebook from businesses and organizations, and that's a horrible idea because you can be working and spending time on social media. So I would encourage all of you to make it a part of your workday. Personally, my little trick is when I come into the office first thing in the morning with my first cup of coffee, I spend some time on Facebook and I spend some time on Twitter, not only to get some headlines, but also to push out the information that I want to get out. And then I do the same thing around the lunch hour and the same thing around the end of the day. So I've made it a part of my workday routine, and then it becomes much easier. Or if it's easier to just set aside some time on your calendar, make it like a meeting appointment and really spend some time to build and grow your community. Jane, could you tell, did I get to all the questions?
Could I tell that what?
Did I get to all the questions?
I believe so. Just if there
I see. Here's one. If no social media is currently being done locally, what are the top 3 things we should do to start? So I'm assuming this is sort of on an organizational basis. To get your page going, I'm actually not sure exactly. If you want to connect on a local level, I would do some digging to see, you know, on a local level what of your policymakers are active on social media. You could probably follow them, like them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter, see what they're doing on YouTube. And then I would encourage you to pick one channel and really focus on growing your community there. Locally, you could also think about real local level media. It doesn't have to be the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. You might have more success on a local level with really, local level papers. And more of these sort of mainstream media have an online component, and with that, they also have social network channels. So you can, connect with them and follow them. And I encourage you all to introduce yourself and connect with folks before you have an ask and do what I call the virtual handshake. So let's say, to go back to the Great Lakes example, I'm making up a publication called the Great Lakes Gazette, and say that's a local paper and you just want to connect with the reporter there or that publication in general. You can just go into your Twitter feed and say, hi at Great Lakes Gazette, I'm so-and-so, and I, fight for, more funding for hashtag Huntington's disease. Let me know if I can ever be helpful to you. So you can just sort of introduce yourself and be transparent, and then they get a mention, so then they'll know next time they're doing a story on anything that has to do with Huntington's disease that they should go to you for information. So that's sort of one example. And you can also do the same thing going back to the Great Lakes example. Maybe you want to connect with the Detroit Free Press, and maybe you know the name of the health reporter, and if you don't know the name of the health reporter, you can just go through a paper and figure out who are the reporters there that cover that beat, and then you go follow them on Twitter and introduce yourself and say, hi at, Washington Post journalist Twitter name. I'm so-and-so. I represent Town HDSA in the Great Lakes area. Please feel free to use me as a resource. And again, they get that mention. It's short. They don't have to read a whole press release or an email. And that way you've sort of done the virtual handshake and connected with them so that next time when you really do have an ask, that won't be the first time you've heard from them. Or I'm sorry, that they've heard from you.
Thank you so much. So we're at about we have about 5 minutes left, and so if anyone has any other questions, please send them our way.
On a local level, I can just give you sort of a quick case study. Here in DC, we have each ward has a commissioner. And there was a local policy battle going on about a new type of car service that the taxi cabs were competing with called Uber. And people did not, the taxi cabs got the legislators to say Uber was illegal, and Uber mobilized their community by saying, tweet at your commissioners, your Ward 1, here's the list of all the commissioners on Twitter. Now you go out and tweet them and tell them to save Uber. And we did, and all the commissioners backed down just from hearing from everyone over Twitter.
Wow.
Well, I think that's everyone. I encourage people to, if they want to follow up through Jane, if you want to talk offline or one-on-one, I'm sure Jane or I could be helpful. And really, I just encourage you to spend some time, trying advocacy out on social media tools, and I think you'll find it to be really successful.
Shana, thank you so, so much. I know I learned a lot, and I hope that people did as well. And just a little shout out, I'm on Twitter at JaneHDSA, and Shana is on Twitter at DC Concierge. So you can, and I've learned a lot from following Shana. I know that already. So thank you, everybody. And if you have any questions offline, please send them to me, and I'll try to get the answer.
Great. Thanks, everyone.